Hello everyone. Welcome back to Stock Market Meridian. Today is 24th July 2026 and you're watching today's pre-market report. Let's begin with global markets. Starting with the US markets, all the major indices closed in a strong negative zone. European markets also ended in negative territory. And looking at Asian markets, Japan, China and South Korea are currently trading on the negative side. So overall, global markets are indicating strong negative sentiment ahead of today's Indian market opening. Now, let's move to commodities. US WTI crude oil is currently trading around $91 to $93 per barrel, while Brent crude is trading near $95 per barrel. Considering the ongoing geopolitical conflicts, crude oil remains extremely volatile, and the possibility of another move toward the $100 per barrel zone remains a major concern. And this could be one of the biggest risks for the Indian market today. Yesterday, Indian crude oil futures closed with a massive gain of around 7.3%, while natural gas futures ended almost completely flat. Coming to precious metals, Indian gold futures closed nearly 2% lower, while international gold futures are currently trading in a neutral to negative zone. Indian silver futures closed around 3.3% lower, while international silver futures are also trading in negative territory. Now, let's check the ADR data. Yesterday, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories was the only major ADR among our tracked stocks to close on the positive side. Meanwhile, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Reliance Industries, Wipro and Infosys ADRs ended in a strong negative zone. This indicates weak overseas sentiment, particularly across banking and IT stocks. So these sectors could remain important to watch after the market opens. Now, moving to FII and DII data. Yesterday, FIIs once again became aggressive sellers, with net selling of around 3,000 crore rupees. On the other side, DIIs provided support, with net buying of approximately 2,947 crore rupees. If you remember, last Thursday, FIIs sold more than 4,200 crore rupees. After that session, yesterday was another major day of heavy FII selling. So once again, sustained foreign institutional selling is giving us a negative signal ahead of today's session. Now let's check the economic calendar. Yesterday, the European Central Bank kept its key interest rates, including the deposit facility rate, unchanged. From the US, initial jobless claims came in below market expectations and also below the previous week's figure. After a long time, we have seen claims at such lower levels, which can be considered a positive indication for the US labor market and broader economy. Coming to today's events, India's preliminary services and manufacturing PMI data for July is scheduled to be released. India's foreign exchange reserves data will also be announced. From the US, preliminary services and manufacturing PMI data for July will be released along with new home sales data. Tomorrow, there are no major economic events scheduled. Before moving further, a quick reminder. I upload pre-market reports every morning before the market opens and post-market reports every evening after the market closes. So if you don't want to miss important stock market updates, make sure you stay connected with Stock Market Meridian. Now let's move to one of the most important sections for today, geopolitical updates. The US-Iran conflict has continued into another consecutive night, keeping tensions across the Middle East extremely elevated. Another important development came from the Red Sea. The Houthis have reportedly intensified activity against shipping, adding another layer of uncertainty to global trade routes. There are also reports that Iran sent Revolutionary Guard commanders and missile-related equipment to Yemen's Houthis this month. All these developments are keeping the energy market extremely volatile. Another major concern is the Strait of Hormuz. Ship traffic through this crucial route remains very low, with only around 15 ships reportedly passing through the route during the last 24 hours. Any further disruption to this critical oil transportation route could put additional upward pressure on crude prices. And this is exactly why the $100 per barrel crude level is extremely important for the Indian market. If crude oil sustainably touches or crosses that level, Indian equities could react very negatively because India is a major importer of crude oil. And remember, today is Friday. With geopolitical uncertainty remaining extremely high, traders could become cautious about carrying large positions into the weekend. Nobody knows what developments could emerge over the next 2 days, so managing overnight risk becomes especially important. There is another important international trade update. The US has announced new Section 301 forced labor-related tariffs covering multiple countries. Under the announced structure, countries enforcing forced labor import restrictions face a 10% tariff rate,
while countries considered to have inadequate enforcement mechanisms face a higher 12.5% rate. Several trading partners, including India, reportedly saw their previously proposed 12.5% rate reduced to 10%. Critical raw materials and essential commodities, including certain oil and gas products, fertilizers, and selected food products, have been exempted to reduce the risk of domestic supply chain disruptions. Goods already covered by Section 232 national security tariffs, including steel and aluminium, along with qualifying North American goods, are also excluded from these new levies. So overall, geopolitical tensions remain supportive for crude oil prices. And if crude oil moves sustainably beyond the $100 level, that could become a major negative trigger for Indian equities. Now, let's cover the important quarterly results. Starting with Infosys, revenue, EBITDA, and EBITDA margin improved on both a year-on-year and quarter-on-quarter basis. However, net profit and net profit margin declined sequentially. Compared with some of the other IT companies that have already reported earnings, Infosys delivered relatively better numbers. Overall, the results were not as weak as the market may have feared, so Infosys could remain an important stock to watch today. Next, Mphasis. Revenue improved on both a year-on-year and quarter-on-quarter basis. However, EBITDA and net profit declined sequentially. Margins also declined on both a year-on-year and quarter-on-quarter basis. Overall, Mphasis delivered a disappointing set of numbers for the quarter. Next, let's look at IndiGo. The company posted weak results compared with the same quarter last year. However, on a quarter-on-quarter basis, losses reduced significantly. Despite pressure from higher fuel costs, operating EBITDA recovered sharply by around 95% sequentially. But elevated aviation turbine fuel prices continued to put pressure on bottom-line profitability. So overall, the numbers remain negative, but weakness in aviation sector earnings had already been broadly anticipated because of elevated fuel prices. IndiGo could therefore remain highly volatile during today's session. Next, Indian Energy Exchange, IEX. Revenue and EBITDA improved on a year-on-year basis but declined sequentially. Net profit improved on both a year-on-year and quarter-on-quarter basis. However, margins declined on both yearly and quarterly comparisons. Overall, IEX delivered a relatively weak set of numbers for the quarter.
Next, Sona Comstar. Revenue improved on both a year-on-year and quarter-on-quarter basis. EBITDA and net profit increased strongly compared with the same quarter last year, although both declined slightly on a quarter-on-quarter basis. At the same time, margins saw significant pressure on both yearly and quarterly comparisons. So overall, Sona Comstar's quarterly performance can be considered mixed to neutral. And finally, Motilal Oswal Financial Services posted a very strong set of quarterly results. Major earnings parameters improved on both a year-on-year and quarter-on-quarter basis. The standout performance came from EBITDA and net profit, which recorded exceptionally strong year-on-year growth. So among the companies we discussed, Motilal Oswal Financial Services delivered one of the strongest sets of quarterly numbers. Now, on your screen you can see the list of companies scheduled to announce their quarterly results today. These stocks are expected to remain in focus throughout today's trading session, so be cautious while trading in these stocks. If possible, avoid taking aggressive positions around earnings announcements because result-related volatility can remain extremely high. So before we close, let's quickly understand today's overall market setup. Global market sentiment is strongly negative. Most major Indian ADRs closed under selling pressure. FIIs have once again become aggressive sellers. Geopolitical tensions remain elevated. And most importantly, crude oil continues to remain the biggest risk factor. So traders should keep a very close eye on crude oil prices, global markets, FII activity, and geopolitical headlines throughout today's session. With today also being Friday, risk management becomes even more important. Avoid unnecessary aggressive trades and be particularly careful before carrying large positions into the weekend. That's all for today's pre-market report. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Stock Market Meridian. And I'll see you again this evening with today's post-market report. Thank you for watching. Signing off. Jai Hind.